The morning I realized my sister Sophia had been alive all these years started like any other day in my quiet apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was sorting through old photos, preparing for what would have been her 32nd birthday, when I stumbled upon something that made my heart stop. It was a postcard tucked between pages of her favorite book, one I hadn't opened in years. The image showed a remote coastline in Maine, and on the back, in handwriting that could only be hers, were coordinates and a single word that changed everything. You see, Sophia had been missing for 7 years, presumed dead, after leaving a heartbreaking note about walking into the Atlantic Ocean. Our family had mourned her, held a memorial service with an empty casket, and I'd spent countless nights wondering if there was something more I could have done. But as I stared at that postcard, dated just 6 months after her disappearance, I realized the story we'd all accepted might not be the truth at all. To understand why finding those coordinates felt like both a miracle and a betrayal, you need to know about Sophia. She wasn't just my older sister. She was the brightest light in our family, at least until that light started dimming when she turned 14. That was the year everything changed, the year she witnessed something that would haunt her for the rest of her life, though none of us truly understood the depth of her trauma until it was too late. It happened during what should have been an ordinary Friday evening. Sophia was babysitting for the Andersons next door, a lovely couple with a 2-year-old daughter named Emma. She'd been their regular babysitter for over a year, and they trusted her completely. But that night, while little Emma slept peacefully upstairs, Sophia heard the back door splinter open downstairs. What followed were 3 hours of pure terror that would reshape the trajectory of her entire life. From her hiding spot in the nursery closet, cradling Emma to keep her quiet, Sophia heard everything: the intruder's heavy footsteps, Mrs. Anderson's pleas, the sounds of a violent struggle, and then the devastating silence that followed. She stayed frozen in that closet for hours, too terrified to move, holding that baby with trembling arms while her own childhood slipped away with each passing minute. When the police finally found them, Sophia was in shock. She'd kept Emma safe. Everyone praised her for that. But something inside my sister had broken. The nightmares started immediately. She'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, reliving those sounds over and over. She couldn't eat, lost weight rapidly, and jumped at every unexpected noise. The girl who used to sing in the shower and dance in the kitchen became a ghost of herself. What made it worse was our parents' response. Margaret and William Hayes were both senior partners at one of Charlotte's most prestigious law firms. They'd built their entire lives around appearances, success, and maintaining a perfect facade. When Sophia begged them for therapy, when she tried to explain the panic attacks that left her gasping for air in the middle of chemistry class, their response was as cold as it was predictable. "The Andersons are the real victims here," our mother said, barely looking up from her laptop during one of her rare appearances at home. "You were just hiding. They lost everything." My father's contribution was equally dismissive. "We all face challenges, Sophia. The strong ones don't dwell on them. Someone has to pay for this house, for your education. We don't have time for dramatics." I was only 12 then, but I remember watching Sophia's face crumble at their words. She'd asked for help, practically begged for it, and they'd responded with emotional abandonment, disguised as tough love. From that moment on, she stopped trying to reach them. She turned inward, finding solace in the strangest places, particularly in anything related to the ocean. Sophia developed an almost obsessive fascination with the sea. She'd spend hours watching documentaries about marine life, reading books about sailing, and drawing elaborate sketches of boats in the margins of her notebooks. She told me once that the sound of waves was the only thing that could drown out the memories from that night. The ocean represented everything our suburban life wasn't: vast, wild, unpredictable, and free from the suffocating expectations that surrounded us. 2 years passed this way. Our parents continued their relentless pursuit of professional success, leaving early and returning late, filling our large colonial home with their absence. They hired tutors when Sophia's grades slipped, enrolled her in activities to beef up her college applications, but never once asked her how she was really doing. They treated her trauma like an inconvenience, something to be managed rather than healed. The breaking point came during my freshman year of college. I'd come home early for spring break, excited to surprise everyone. Instead, I was the one who got the surprise. I found Sophia in the downstairs bathroom, my father's razor in her hand, thin red lines carved into her thighs. But it wasn't random self-harm. She'd carefully cut letters into her skin, spelling out a single word that made my heart shatter: help. When I showed our parents what I'd discovered, their response was even worse than their usual indifference. My mother actually sighed, as if Sophia's pain was just another item on her to-do list. "She's being dramatic again," she said, returning to her case files. "Attention-seeking behavior. If we react, we're just encouraging it." My father nodded in agreement, adding his favorite refrain about having bills to pay and reputations to maintain. That was the moment I knew I had to do something drastic. Using half of my college savings, money I'd earned working summers and weekends, I booked 2 tickets to Alaska. It was impulsive, maybe even reckless, but I couldn't stand by and watch my sister disappear piece by piece. I told our parents we were going on a sisterly bonding trip, and surprisingly, they didn't object. They were probably relieved to have the problem temporarily out of sight. The trip to Alaska was like watching Sophia come back to life. The moment we landed in Anchorage, something shifted in her. The mountains, the vast wilderness, the proximity to the ocean, it all seemed to awaken something that had been dormant. We spent 2 weeks exploring, hiking, and for the first time in years, I heard her laugh. Not the hollow, polite laugh she'd perfected for family dinners, but real, genuine joy. It was during that trip that we met Earl Morrison, a weathered fisherman in his 60s who ran a boat salvage yard near Homer. Sophia was drawn to his place like a magnet, spending hours among the abandoned vessels, running her hands over worn hulls and asking endless questions about navigation and boat repair. Earl took a shine to her immediately, recognizing something in her that I was only beginning to understand. On our last night in Alaska, Earl pulled me aside while Sophia was examining an old navigation system. His words would haunt me for years to come. "That girl's got salt water in her veins," he said, his eyes serious. "Some souls are meant for the sea, and keeping them landlocked is like caging a wild bird. It's cruel." At the time, I thought he was just a romantic old sailor spinning tales, but looking back, I realize he saw Sophia's truth more clearly than any of us. The flight back to Charlotte was like watching a light slowly extinguish. With each mile away from Alaska, Sophia retreated further into herself. By the time we landed, the brief spark of life I'd witnessed had faded back to the familiar emptiness. But something had changed. Alaska had planted a seed, and over the following months, I watched it grow in unexpected ways. Sophia started disappearing for hours at a time, returning with sand in her shoes and salt in her hair, even though the nearest beach was a 5-hour drive away. She began watching boat restoration videos late into the night, filling notebooks with meticulous notes about diesel engines and solar panel installations. She researched commercial fishing licenses, studied weather patterns, and learned skills that seemed completely random: water desalination, emergency medical procedures, radio operation. During one of our rare family dinners, about 6 months after the Alaska trip, Sophia tried one more time to reach our parents. I'll never forget the hope in her eyes as she laid out her plans. She wanted to buy a small sailboat, learn to live self-sufficiently, maybe work as a fishing boat crew member, or teach sailing lessons. For the first time in years, she was animated, passionate, alive. Our parents' response was swift and brutal. "You're not special, Sophia," our mother said, not even pretending to consider the idea. "Millions of people witness traumatic events. They don't run away to play sailor. They get therapy, they move on, they contribute to society." My father's addition was equally cutting. "We've invested too much in your future for you to throw it away on some childish fantasy. You'll finish your degree, get a real job, and stop this nonsense." They went further than just words. Over the next few days, they systematically destroyed Sophia's dreams. They threw out her navigation books, blocked sailing websites on our home router, and even contacted local marinas to ensure she couldn't take lessons without their permission. They treated her passion for the ocean like a symptom of mental illness rather than a pathway to healing. That night, I heard Sophia crying through our shared wall, but it was different from her usual tears. This sounded like something breaking, like the last thread of hope being severed. When I knocked on her door, she wouldn't answer. For the next 3 weeks, she moved through the house like a ghost, but there was something eerie about her calmness. The anxiety that had plagued her for years seemed to evaporate, replaced by an unsettling serenity. She started giving things away. Her laptop went to a classmate who couldn't afford one. Her designer clothes, gifts from our parents meant to maintain appearances, were donated to charity. She spent hours writing in a journal, which she'd then carefully hide. When I asked her about it, she just smiled sadly and said she was getting her thoughts in order. The morning she disappeared, I found her goodbye letter on my pillow. The words are burned into my memory. "I'm going to the ocean to finally find peace. At least this way, I can die surrounded by what I love instead of being slowly suffocated by what I'm supposed to be. Tell Mom and Dad they win. I couldn't be the daughter they wanted. I'm sorry for being weak." The letter went on, leaving specific messages for people in her life. She asked me to check on her friend Marcus, who also struggled with anxiety. She reminded our mother about an upcoming mammogram appointment. She even mentioned Joyce, our mail carrier, asking me to give her a Christmas card she'd already prepared. It was so thoroughly Sophia, thinking of everyone else, even in what we believed were her final moments. The police search lasted 2 weeks. They found her car at a remote desert trailhead, keys in the ignition, her prescription anxiety medication untouched in the glove compartment. Her phone and wallet were on the passenger seat, along with a map that led nowhere. The trail itself petered out after a few miles, ending at nothing but empty desert. Search dogs lost her scent near a wash that had been dry for months. The memorial service was a study in hypocrisy. Our parents, suddenly freed from their work obligations by forced bereavement leave, played the part of grieving parents perfectly. They spoke of missed opportunities and regrets, but even in their sorrow, they couldn't resist framing Sophia's death as a tragedy that had happened to them rather than a life that had been lost. They moved to Michigan 6 months later, claiming Charlotte held too many painful memories. But I knew the truth. They were running from their guilt, from the questions in people's eyes, from the weight of their own failures. They started over in Grand Rapids, new jobs at a new firm, a new house to fill with their absence, new colleagues who didn't know they'd had a daughter who'd begged for help and received only judgment. I stayed in Charlotte, fell into my own deep depression, and spent 3 years in therapy trying to make sense of it all. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, my therapist, helped me understand the complex dynamics of our family, the way trauma compounds when it's dismissed, and the desperate measures people take when they feel trapped. But even with all that understanding, I couldn't let go of Sophia's letter. I must have read it 1,000 times over those years, analyzing every word, every pause, every seemingly random detail. Something about it nagged at me, like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. The paragraph breaks were strange, sentences cut off mid-thought only to resume in odd places. The handwriting was definitely Sophia's, but the structure felt deliberate in a way I couldn't define. It was during a particularly difficult therapy session, about 3 years after Sophia's disappearance, that Dr. Hernandez said something that sparked a memory. We were discussing hidden messages, the way people in crisis sometimes communicate in code when they feel they can't speak directly. Suddenly, I remembered something Sophia had shown me during our Alaska trip, an old maritime navigation technique Earl had taught her about hiding messages in plain sight. That night, I spread the letter out on my apartment floor with fresh eyes. I tried everything, looking for patterns in the first letter of each sentence, checking for invisible ink, even analyzing the paper under different lights. Nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Sophia had left me something, some clue that everyone else had missed. It took 2 more years of intermittent obsession before the pattern revealed itself. I was preparing for a move, packing up my apartment when I decided to count the words in each paragraph of Sophia's letter. It was a random impulse born of procrastination, but when I converted those numbers to decimals and recognized them as coordinates, my hands started shaking so badly I could barely hold the calculator. The coordinates pointed to a specific bay in Alaska, not far from Homer where we'd met Earl. More specifically, they marked the exact spot where Sophia and I had gone kayaking on our last day there, a hidden cove she'd fallen in love with. My heart was pounding as I booked the next flight to Anchorage, my mind racing with possibilities I was afraid to fully consider. The flight felt both endless and too quick. Part of me wanted to call someone to share this discovery, but another part knew I had to do this alone. If I was wrong, if this was just my grief creating patterns where none existed, I didn't want witnesses to my delusion. But if I was right, I couldn't even complete that thought. Landing in Anchorage brought back a flood of memories. The airport looked exactly as it had 5 years ago, down to the same stuffed grizzly bear display that Sophia had found both terrifying and hilarious. I rented a car and drove toward Homer, my hands gripping the wheel as my mind cycled through possibilities. As I pulled into the gravel parking area near Earl's salvage yard, a young man emerged from the office. He looked to be in his late 20s, with the same weathered hands and careful gait I remembered from Earl. This had to be his son, though Earl had never mentioned having children during our visit. The moment I approached, recognition flashed across his face, followed immediately by panic. He tried to leave, actually jogged toward a beaten pickup truck, but I called out Sophia's name and he froze. When he turned back, his face had gone pale, and I knew with absolute certainty that my sister was alive. His name was Jake Morrison, Earl's only son, and once he realized I wasn't leaving, the story came out in pieces. Sophia had been in contact with him for years, first through Earl, and then directly after Earl had died 2 years ago. She was alive, living somewhere remote, working as a boat mechanic and navigation instructor under an assumed name. The relief I felt was immediately followed by a crushing sense of betrayal. My sister had been alive all these years, letting me grieve, letting our parents suffer, while she built a new life. But as Jake continued talking, helped along by his wife Emma, who'd been listening from the truck, I began to understand the complexity of Sophia's choice. She'd executed a 5-year plan that Earl had helped her design. The desert trailhead had been a diversion. She'd actually left through a private airstrip used by bush pilots, flying directly to Alaska with a new identity Earl had helped her create. She'd spent years building a network of safe houses and supporters, teaching navigation to other women fleeing dangerous situations, creating the life our parents had tried to deny her. But 6 months ago, the messages had stopped. Jake claimed he didn't know why, but Emma's expression suggested otherwise. There was fear there, and something else. Protectiveness, maybe. They knew more than they were saying, and I was determined to find out what. The next few days were a whirlwind of detective work and delicate negotiations. I learned that Sophia's network extended throughout the fishing community, that she'd become something of a legend among those who knew her secret. She'd helped dozens of women escape abusive situations, using her navigation skills and boat knowledge to ferry them to safety. Marcus, her friend from Charlotte, had known all along. He admitted this when I finally called him, his voice heavy with the weight of keeping her secret. She'd contacted him yearly on his birthday, always from different numbers, always checking that I was okay. The betrayal stung less, knowing she'd never fully let go, that even in her new life, she'd kept a thread connected to her past. The fishing community initially closed ranks against me, suspicious of anyone from Sophia's old life. Fuel became mysteriously unavailable, lodging was suddenly booked, and conversations ended the moment I approached. But I persisted, using the same quiet determination Sophia had taught me during our childhood, and slowly, the walls began to crack. An elderly teacher at the community center admitted Sophia had taught navigation classes there under the name Sarah Waters. A dock worker mentioned seeing her just a week ago, noting she moved carefully, protectively, like someone carrying precious cargo. The pieces were forming a picture that both thrilled and terrified me. The breakthrough came when I discovered Sophia's emergency cache hidden exactly where she used to hide treasures during our Alaska trip. Among the supplies and emergency funds was a logbook that confirmed my growing suspicion. My sister was pregnant, approximately 8 months along based on the medical supplies she'd been stockpiling. Jake's attempts to keep me from finding her grew increasingly desperate. He tried bribes, threats, even called our parents to give them false information about Sophia being in Washington state. But his control was slipping. The community that had once protected him as Earl's son began to see him for what he'd become. Not a protector of Sophia's freedom, but another person trying to control her. The coordinates from her letter led to a small island, accessible only by boat and clearly inhabited. As our small flotilla approached, I could see the evidence of years of careful cultivation. Solar panels caught the afternoon sun, gardens showed patient tending, and smoke rose from a chimney that promised warmth and life inside. What happened next unfolded like a scene from a dream. Sophia emerged from the cabin slowly, visibly pregnant, her face showing years of sun and salt air, but also something else: peace. The sister I'd known, always anxious and hyper-vigilant, had been replaced by someone who moved with quiet confidence, even in her wariness. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She simply stood there, one hand supporting her belly, the other holding a fishing rod like it was the most natural thing in the world. The bracelet I'd made her in 7th grade still circled her wrist, faded but intact, and that small detail broke something open inside me. Marcus had brought her old stuffed whale, the one she'd slept with until she was 16, and set it on a log between us. The sight of it cracked her composure, and she lowered herself carefully onto a boulder. Another woman emerged from the cabin, younger but with the same watchful stance, clearly ready to protect Sophia if needed. What followed was not the confrontation I'd imagined so many times, but something far more complex. Sophia showed me years of documentation, therapy notes from a counselor she'd found in Alaska, evidence of our parents' systematic emotional neglect, and the careful construction of her new life. She'd built something beautiful from the ashes of her trauma, something our parents could never have imagined or allowed. The peace was shattered by Jake's arrival, our parents on speakerphone demanding their rights, threatening legal action. The stress triggered labor, and suddenly the emotional reunion became a medical emergency. As Sophia's friend helped her inside, I had to choose: maintain the barrier against those who would drag her back, or help bring new life into the world. The choice was easy. Inside that cabin, as my sister labored to bring her son into the world, the outside chaos faded to nothing. I held her hand as she'd once held mine through childhood nightmares, and together we weathered the storm of birth while another storm raged on the beach outside. Earl Phoenix was born as the sun set, his cries strong and healthy, his mother's eyes bright with tears of joy rather than pain. She'd named him for the man who'd saved her and the city she'd had to leave to truly live. Our parents stood on that beach in their expensive clothes, looking as out of place as they'd always been in our emotional lives, finally understanding that their daughter had succeeded, not despite them, but because she'd escaped them. They left as darkness fell, their threats empty against the solid reality of Sophia's chosen family. Jake's influence crumbled when Emma revealed evidence of his financial exploitation of the network, his attempt to control what his father had created to liberate. The community that had initially rejected me now embraced us both, recognizing that family isn't about blood, but about who shows up when you need them most. 6 months later, I lived in a small cabin near Sophia's, teaching navigation to trauma survivors while she wrote about healing and raised her son with her chosen family. The network Earl had started continued stronger than ever, with new safeguards against those who would corrupt its mission. Our parents sent one letter attempting reconciliation, but accepted silence as their answer. The coordinates in that letter hadn't led to an ending, but to a beginning. They'd led to understanding that sometimes the only way to truly live is to leave behind those who refuse to see your pain. They'd led to proof that with courage and help from unexpected places, it's possible to build a life of meaning from the ruins of trauma. Every morning now I watch the sun rise over the water, and I think about the journey that brought us here. Sophia still has hard days. Trauma doesn't simply vanish because you've found peace, but she faces them surrounded by people who understand, who don't minimize her pain or demand she be someone she's not. The refuge continues to operate, quietly helping those who need to disappear in order to survive. We've expanded the network, added resources for therapy and legal aid, created a scholarship fund in Earl's name for those learning maritime skills. It's become more than just an escape route. It's a pathway to new life. Sometimes I receive messages from women Sophia helped, photos of them in their new lives, safe and thriving. Each one is a testament to what becomes possible when we stop accepting that suffering in silence is strength. When we recognize that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave. Our parents occasionally appear in Michigan society pages, smiling at charity galas and legal conferences. They've built new lives too, ones that don't include the daughters who couldn't conform to their vision. It's a mutual orphaning that brought more peace than any forced reconciliation could have. Marcus visits twice a year, bringing news from Charlotte and taking back reassurances that we're well. He's become part of our extended chosen family, proof that some bonds transcend distance and change. He's working on his own healing, inspired by Sophia's courage to face his anxiety rather than hide from it. The ocean that Sophia once saw as her ending became her beginning. Every day she teaches Earl Phoenix about tides and weather patterns, about navigation and self-sufficiency, but most importantly about the strength that comes from being truly seen and accepted. He's growing up surrounded by people who understand that love isn't about control, but about creating space for others to become who they're meant to be. I often think about that 14-year-old girl hiding in a closet, protecting someone else's child while her own childhood ended. I think about how differently her story might have unfolded if just one adult had truly listened, had offered help instead of judgment. It's why the work we do now matters so much, why every person we help escape is a victory against the systems that fail those who need them most. The coordinates that brought me here were more than just numbers on a map. They were an invitation to understand that family isn't about shared DNA, but about shared commitment to each other's well-being. They were proof that even in our darkest moments, when we feel most alone, there might be someone planning our rescue, even if that someone is ourselves. Sophia's story isn't unique. Every day, people make the choice she made, leaving behind lives that are slowly killing them to build something sustainable. Not all of them have an Earl to help them, a Marcus to keep their secrets, or a sister who refuses to give up. But they all have the same fundamental need: to be believed, to be helped, to be allowed to save themselves. The morning I found those coordinates, I thought I was looking for my sister. What I found was so much more: a community of survivors, a network of helpers, and the understanding that sometimes love means letting go of who you think someone should be and embracing who they are. It means recognizing that the person you're trying to save might already be saving themselves, and the best thing you can do is support their journey, even when you don't fully understand it. As I finish writing this, Earl Phoenix is taking his first wobbling steps across the cabin floor, reaching for his mother with complete trust. Sophia catches him with hands that once shook with trauma, but now move with confident grace. She looks at me over his head, and in her smile I see not just my sister, but the woman she was always meant to become. The coordinates led me here, but love is what made me stay. Love for a sister who refused to let trauma define her, for a community that understands the value of second chances, and for the truth that sometimes the only way forward is to chart an entirely new course. The ocean that almost claimed her gave her back to us transformed, and in finding her, I found parts of myself I didn't know were missing. This is the story of how my sister disappeared and how I found her. But it's also the story of how we both learned that survival sometimes requires more than just staying alive. It requires having the courage to live on your own terms, to build families of choice when families of origin fail us, and to trust that somewhere in this vast world, there are people who will see you for who you truly are and help you become who you're meant to be. The sun sets now over our Alaskan refuge, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that Sophia says remind her of hope. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new people seeking safety, new opportunities to repair what trauma has broken. But tonight, we're simply two sisters who found their way back to each other across years and miles and misunderstandings, proof that love, real love, can survive even the most necessary betrayals. And in the end, isn't that what we're all searching for? A place where we can finally stop pretending, stop performing, stop trying to fit into spaces that were never shaped for us? Sophia found hers on a remote island, surrounded by people who understood that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to help them disappear. I found mine in choosing to join her, in recognizing that family is ultimately about showing up for each other's truth, even when that truth leads to unexpected places. The coordinates in that letter were never really about geography. They were about finding our way home to ourselves, to lives that honor who we are rather than who we're supposed to be. And in that finding, in that choosing, we discovered that the endings we fear most might actually be beginnings in disguise, waiting patiently for us to be brave enough to claim them. Looking back now, I can trace the path that led us here through so many small moments, so many signs I missed or misunderstood. The way Sophia used to stand at her bedroom window for hours, staring out at nothing, or so I thought. Now I know she was imagining horizons, planning escapes, building the life she would eventually claim. The ocean books weren't just escapism, they were textbooks for a future she was determined to create. I think about all the times she tried to tell us, in her own way, what she needed. The poems she left on the kitchen counter about drowning in shallow water while dreaming of the deep. The documentary about commercial fishing she asked us to watch as a family, only to have our parents dismiss it as depressing. The sailing lessons she begged for every birthday and Christmas, requests that were met with offers of tennis or golf instead, sports that fit better with our parents' vision of success. There's a photo on my cabin wall now, taken a week after Earl Phoenix was born. Sophia is holding him while standing knee-deep in the surf, her face turned toward the sunrise. She looks nothing like the hollow-eyed girl who used to jump at shadows in our Charlotte home. This woman is solid, grounded, present in a way she never could be when she was trying to fit into spaces that were all wrong for her shape. Emma, Jake's ex-wife, has become one of our closest friends. She took her daughter and moved to a small house near the harbor, where she works with the Refuge Network to help other women escape controlling situations. Her experience with Jake, watching him transform from protector to captor, gave her insights that have saved others from similar traps. She often says that Sophia's courage to disappear gave her the courage to leave. The irony isn't lost on me that our parents' coldness, their emotional abandonment, ultimately gave Sophia the skills she needed to survive on her own. Their neglect taught her self-reliance. Their dismissal of her trauma taught her to seek help elsewhere. Their focus on appearances taught her that the substance of a life matters more than its surface. In trying to force her into their mold, they created someone strong enough to break it entirely. Marcus tells me that our story has become something of a legend in certain online communities, spaces where people struggling with trauma and family rejection gather to share their experiences. He's careful never to reveal identifying details, but the essence of it, that sometimes you have to let the old life die completely for a new one to be born, resonates with more people than we could have imagined. The Refuge Network has evolved beyond what Earl originally envisioned. We now have connections in 7 states, safe houses in 12 cities, and a fund that helps people start over with new identities when necessary. Every person we help is vetted carefully, their stories verified, their need assessed. We've learned to spot the difference between those running from consequences and those running for their lives, a distinction that's sometimes subtle but always crucial. Sophia's writing has found an audience too. Under her pseudonym, she's published 3 books about trauma, healing, and the ocean as metaphor and reality. The income supports not just her family but the Refuge Network itself. She receives letters from readers who say her words saved them, gave them permission to prioritize their own healing over others' comfort. Each letter is proof that pain transformed can become a gift to others walking similar paths. I've learned so much about trauma since finding Sophia. How it lives in the body, changing neural pathways, affecting everything from sleep patterns to the ability to trust. How healing isn't linear but spiral, circling back to the same wounds at deeper levels. How sometimes the people who claim to love us most are the ones causing the most damage. And how recognizing that truth is the first step toward freedom. Our therapist here, Dr. Michael Reeves, is himself a survivor who found his way to Alaska after escaping a cult in Texas. He understands the complexity of chosen disappearance, the guilt and liberation it brings in equal measure. He's helped both Sophia and me process not just the trauma of our childhoods, but the trauma of separation, the years we lost and can never reclaim. Some nights, when the northern lights dance across the sky, Sophia and I sit on her porch and talk about the what-ifs. What if our parents had gotten her help after the Anderson tragedy? What if they'd supported her dreams instead of crushing them? What if she'd felt safe enough to stay? But we always come back to the same conclusion. The path that led us here, painful as it was, created something beautiful that wouldn't have existed otherwise. The women who come through our network often arrive terrified, looking over their shoulders, jumping at shadows the way Sophia once did. We give them time, space, and most importantly, belief. We don't question their need to run or minimize their fear. We simply provide what they need to start over: practical skills, emotional support, and the knowledge that they're not alone. One woman, Rebecca, arrived 6 months ago with twin toddlers and bruises she tried to hide beneath heavy makeup. She'd been a corporate executive in Seattle, successful by any external measure, but living in daily fear of a husband whose charm masked a vicious need for control. Now she works at the marina, her children play freely on the beach, and she's learning to sail. Last week, she told me she'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe without checking who was watching. These stories multiply, each one a testament to the courage it takes to leave everything behind for the possibility of something better. Not all of them stay in Alaska. Some heal here and then move on, creating new lives in places that call to them. We help with that too, connecting them with resources, teaching them how to build identities that can withstand scrutiny while protecting their privacy. The legal aspects of what we do exist in gray areas. We're careful to stay within the law while helping people exercise their right to privacy, to start over, to escape situations where the legal system has failed them. Many of the women we help have tried conventional channels, have sought restraining orders and divorces, only to find that paper barriers don't stop determined abusers. We provide what the system cannot: true disappearance. Earl Phoenix is 3 now, a sturdy child with his mother's thoughtful eyes and a laugh that echoes across the water. He's growing up bilingual, speaking English and the language of the sea with equal fluency. He knows about tides and currents, can identify birds by their calls, and helps his mother tend the garden that feeds them. He's never known a world where love comes with conditions, or where being yourself is something to apologize for. Sometimes I catch Sophia watching him with an expression I can only describe as fierce gratitude. She's giving him the childhood she wished she'd had, one where emotions are acknowledged, where questions are encouraged, where the adults in his life are present and attentive. It's healing for her to provide what she never received, to break the generational pattern of emotional neglect. Our parents send a card every Christmas to Marcus's address, knowing he'll forward them if we want them. The cards are always generic, signed formally, containing no real message beyond their continued existence. We've never responded, and they've never pushed. I think they understand on some level that their daughters are better off without them, though they'd never admit it aloud. The fishing community has embraced us completely now. Where once there was suspicion, there's now recognition of kindred spirits. These are people who understand choosing the sea over the shore, who know that sometimes the only way to survive is to cast off from everything that ties you to land. They've taught us their ways, and we've contributed our own skills to the collective knowledge. Sophia has become known for her weather predictions, an almost supernatural ability to read the signs that others miss. She says it comes from years of hypervigilance, transformed into something useful. All that anxious attention to danger, refined into awareness of natural patterns. Fishermen consult her before heading out, trusting her instincts over official forecasts. The network continues to grow, but carefully, organically. We don't advertise or recruit. People find us when they need us, through whispered recommendations and careful online searches. We've developed a screening process that protects both those seeking help and those providing it. Not everyone who wants to disappear should, and part of our work is helping people distinguish between problems that require geographical solutions and those that need different interventions. Dr. Reeves runs group sessions for trauma survivors, circles where people share their stories and strategies for healing. Sophia rarely misses these gatherings, finding strength in community and offering her own journey as evidence that survival is possible. She's become a mentor to newer arrivals, showing by example that trauma doesn't have to be the end of the story. I've started painting, something I never had time or mental space for in my old life. The Alaskan landscape provides endless inspiration, but more often I find myself painting portraits of the women who pass through our network. Not their faces, which must remain protected, but their essence. The slope of shoulders finally unburdened, hands learning new skills, silhouettes against sunsets that promise tomorrow will be different from yesterday. One painting hangs in the community center, a woman standing at a ship's wheel, face turned toward an invisible horizon. I didn't realize until after I'd finished it that I'd painted Sophia, not as she is now, but as she was always meant to be. Several people have told me it gives them hope, seeing that image of someone clearly in command of their own navigation. The refugee network has developed its own culture, its own traditions. We celebrate arrival days instead of birthdays for those who choose, marking the anniversary of when they began their new lives. We share meals where everyone contributes something, potlucks that become inadvertent therapy sessions as people bond over shared experiences, and newfound freedoms. There's a wall in the community center covered with photos of boats. Each one represents someone who's passed through our network, learned to sail, and moved on to new waters. Some send updates from their new lives, photos of different harbors, different horizons. Others maintain silence, and we respect that too. Freedom includes the right to leave even good things behind. Sophia's health has improved dramatically since those dark days in Charlotte. The panic attacks that once controlled her life have faded to occasional whispers, manageable now with breathing techniques and the knowledge that she's safe. She still has triggers. Sudden noises can make her freeze, and she avoids crowds, but these feel like reasonable adaptations rather than limitations. We've had close calls over the years. Once, a private investigator hired by an abusive ex-husband got uncomfortably close to uncovering the network. Another time, a well-meaning but misguided family member tried to force a reunion that would have been dangerous for everyone involved. Each incident taught us better security measures, refined our protocols, strengthened our boundaries. The hardest part of this work is saying no. Not everyone who contacts us can be helped, either because their situation doesn't meet our criteria or because helping them would endanger others. These decisions weigh on us, especially when we later hear that someone we turned away faced terrible consequences. But maintaining the integrity of the network means making hard choices. Protecting the many sometimes requires disappointing the few. Jake eventually found his own path to redemption. After losing Emma and facing the community's rejection, he entered treatment for alcoholism and began therapy to address his control issues. Last year, he sent a letter of apology, taking full responsibility for betraying his father's vision. He lives in Oregon now, working as a substance abuse counselor, using his own fall from grace to help others recognize destructive patterns. The money our parents had set aside for our futures, the trust funds they held over our heads like carrots and sticks, remains untouched. Through Marcus, we had lawyers ensure that those funds were redirected to charities supporting trauma survivors and domestic violence victims. It felt like poetic justice, transforming money meant to control us into resources for others seeking freedom. I sometimes wonder what our parents tell people when asked about their daughters. Do they maintain the fiction of our deaths? Claim we're estranged? Or have they simply erased us from their narrative entirely, the way they erased our emotional needs when we were children? The not knowing used to bother me, but now it feels like freedom, being so thoroughly disconnected from their version of reality. The climate here suits us. The long winters that others find oppressive feel like protection to us. The darkness gives cover, the cold keeps the curious away, the isolation that might drive others mad provides the solitude necessary for deep healing. We've learned to find beauty in the austere landscape, joy in the subtle changes of season, community in the small population of year-round residents. Sophia has taught Earl Phoenix our old family stories, but edited, transformed into tales where the children are heard, their needs are met, their dreams are supported. He doesn't know they're based on our experiences, won't until he's older. For now, they're just bedtime stories about brave kids who find their way to safety, guided by helpful adults and their own inner wisdom. The walls of my cabin are covered with maps now, not just of Alaska, but of all the places our network extends. Each pin represents a life changed, a person who chose their own path over the one prescribed for them. Looking at it reminds me that we're part of something larger than our own healing, a quiet revolution of people refusing to accept that suffering is inevitable. We've created what we needed and couldn't find, a place where trauma is acknowledged, but not defining, where the past informs but doesn't control the present, where chosen family proves that love isn't about obligation, but about showing up for each other's truth. It's not perfect. We have conflicts and setbacks, moments of doubt and days of struggle, but it's real in a way our old life never was. The sun sets differently here than it did in Charlotte. There's a quality to the light, especially in summer when darkness barely touches the sky, that makes everything feel possible. Maybe it's the angle, maybe it's the clear air, or maybe it's just that we're different people now, capable of seeing beauty we were too wounded to notice before. Sophia keeps a photo of our family from before everything changed, when she was 13 and still believed our parents could learn to see her. We're all smiling in the photo, dressed in coordinating outfits for some forgotten holiday card. Looking at it now, I can see the strain in her smile, the way she's holding herself carefully, already learning to perform happiness rather than feel it. Next to that photo is one taken last month. Sophia and Earl Phoenix building sandcastles, me painting nearby, Emma's daughter running through the frame with a piece of kelp streaming behind her like a banner. No one is looking at the camera, no one is performing. We're just living, absorbed in the moment, secure in the knowledge that we're exactly where we belong. The refuge continues because it must. Every day, someone somewhere makes the calculation Sophia made, weighing the pain of staying against the uncertainty of leaving. Some will find the courage to go, others will find the strength to stay and fight for change where they are. Both choices are valid, both require support, and we're here for those who decide that geographical solutions are their best option. I've learned that healing happens in spirals rather than straight lines, some days usually triggered by seemingly innocent things like a legal drama on TV or the sound of a door slamming. The old wounds ache. But now we have tools to tend them, people who understand without requiring explanation, and most importantly, lives worth living beyond the pain. Sophia's latest book explores the concept of necessary betrayals, the times when keeping someone's secret would enable their destruction, when honoring your own truth requires disappointing those who claim to love you. It's her most personal work yet, though still cloaked in enough fiction to protect the real stories. The dedication reads, "To everyone who had to leave in order to live." The coordinates she left me weren't just about finding her physical location. They were about finding the courage to see our family clearly, to stop making excuses for inexcusable behavior, to choose healing over the familiar dysfunction. They were an invitation to join her in building something better from the wreckage of what we'd been given. Earl Phoenix asked me yesterday why he doesn't have grandparents like his friend at preschool. Sophia answered simply, "Some people don't know how to love without hurting, so we love you from far away instead." He accepted this with the easy wisdom of children, more interested in the hermit crab he'd found than in the complexities of family trauma. That's the gift we're giving him and all the children growing up in our extended network. The knowledge that love shouldn't hurt, that asking for help is strength, not weakness, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is start over. They're growing up with adults who've done their own healing work, who can provide the emotional availability that was denied to us. The Marine Supply Store now stocks books on trauma and recovery alongside navigation charts and fishing gear. The owner, Janet, says healing is just another kind of journey that requires the right equipment. She's not wrong. The tools we need for emotional navigation are as crucial as any compass or depth finder, and making them available in unexpected places removes some of the shame around seeking them. We've started hosting monthly dinners for anyone in the community dealing with difficult family relationships. Not everyone has fled as dramatically as Sophia, but many people here have complicated relationships with their origins. Over salmon and sourdough, we share stories and strategies, normalizing the grief that comes with accepting that some relationships can't be salvaged. The fact that Sophia saved money from her boat repair work to pay for therapy even when she could barely afford food speaks to her determination to heal properly. She knew that geographical distance alone wouldn't cure what ailed her, that she needed professional help to process the trauma. That commitment to doing the internal work alongside the external changes is what made her transformation sustainable. Marcus visits more frequently now, sometimes bringing other friends from our old life, who can be trusted with the truth. These visits are bittersweet, reminders of what we left behind, but also affirmation of what we've built. Seeing ourselves through their eyes, successful and stable and genuinely happy, helps counter the voice that sometimes whispers we're just running from our problems. The network has protocols now for when someone we've helped wants to reconnect with their past life. It happens more often than you'd think, once the immediate danger has passed and healing has progressed. We facilitate these reconnections carefully, always prioritizing safety, sometimes discovering that bridges we thought were burned can be carefully rebuilt. Not all stories end like ours. We've lost people over the years, some to the dangers they were fleeing, others to the despair that can overwhelm even after escape. Each loss reminds us why this work matters, why we can't let compassion fatigue or bureaucratic challenges stop us from trying. Every life saved honors those we couldn't reach in time. The Alaska State Library now has a special collection focused on trauma recovery and starting over, funded by an anonymous donation that everyone knows came from our network. Making these resources publicly available was Sophia's idea, recognizing that not everyone who needs help will find their way to us directly. Sometimes a book at the right moment can plant the seed of possibility. We've learned to recognize the signs of someone preparing to flee, the careful questions about boat schedules, the interest in weather patterns, the way they study maps with an intensity that goes beyond casual curiosity. When we spot these signs, we make ourselves available without pushing, letting them know through subtle signals that help exists if they need it. The paradox of our work is that we hope to eventually make ourselves obsolete. Every person we help escape is both a success and an indictment of systems that fail to protect the vulnerable. We dream of a world where geographic solutions aren't necessary, where people can heal without having to disappear. Until then, we hold space for those who need to vanish in order to survive. Sophia's transformation from victim to healer didn't happen overnight. There were years when she could barely take care of herself, much less help others. But trauma integrated becomes wisdom, and pain transformed becomes compassion. Now she stands as living proof that the worst things that happen to us don't have to define our endings. The coordinates that brought me here have taken on mythic significance in our story, but the truth is simpler. Sophia wanted to be found, just not by everyone. She left breadcrumbs only I would recognize, trusted that eventually I would be ready to see them. That trust, maintained across years of separation and silence, moves me still. As I write this, morning fog rolls in from the ocean, blurring the boundaries between sea and shore, sky and earth. It's the kind of morning Sophia loves, when the world feels malleable, full of possibility. She'll be up soon, Earl Phoenix chattering beside her as they check the weather station and plan their day. Another ordinary morning in our extraordinary life. The Refuge Network will continue evolving, adapting to new challenges and opportunities. We're exploring partnerships with legal aid organizations, developing better resources for financial independence, creating art therapy programs for trauma survivors. Each expansion honors Earl's original vision, while addressing needs he couldn't have anticipated. Sometimes reporters sniff around, sensing a story in our remote community's unusual demographics. We've become expert at deflection, at being helpful without being revealing. The people we protect depend on our discretion, and maintaining the network's integrity matters more than any recognition we might receive. The truth is, we're just one node in a vast informal network of people helping each other escape untenable situations. Across the country, in small towns and big cities, people open their doors to strangers in flight, offer temporary shelter, share resources and knowledge. We're part of an ancient human tradition of mutual aid that predates any formal institutions. Earl Phoenix will grow up knowing his mother's story, understanding why she had to leave everything behind to become who she truly is. He'll know about the grandparents he's never met, not with bitterness, but with the calm acceptance that some people are incapable of love without conditions. Most importantly, he'll know that he is deeply loved exactly as he is. No performance required. The coordinates in Sophia's letter changed my life as profoundly as they changed hers. They led me to question everything I thought I knew about family, duty, and love. They forced me to confront my own complicity in systems that had hurt someone I claimed to care about. Most importantly, they gave me the chance to choose differently, to be the sister she needed rather than the one our parents had trained me to be. This is the story I wish I could tell everyone who's trapped in situations that are slowly killing them. Leaving is possible. Starting over is real. Building a life aligned with your truth rather than others' expectations isn't just a dream, it's achievable with planning, support, and tremendous courage. The coordinates to your new life might be hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to be ready to see them. As the fog lifts and another day begins in our Alaskan refuge, I'm grateful for every twist of the journey that brought us here. The pain was real, the loss is significant, but what we've built from the wreckage is beautiful beyond anything we could have imagined when we were trapped in our parents' airless world. We found our way home by leaving home, discovered our true family by releasing false obligations, and learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is simply believing someone when they tell you what they need. The coordinates were never just numbers. They were an act of faith, a bet that love could survive necessary betrayal, that truth could triumph over convenient lies. Every day we proved that bet was worth making, building lives of meaning from the raw materials of trauma and hope, creating the family we needed from the family we chose, and helping others find their own coordinates to freedom. Now, as I sit in my small cabin, listening to the waves that once called to Sophia like a siren song, I understand that every ending contains within it the seeds of beginning. The little girl who hid in a closet, protecting someone else's child while her own innocence died, has become a woman who helps others find safety. The silence our parents forced upon her has transformed into a voice that speaks for those who cannot yet speak for themselves. I think about the ripples our story has created, how one person's courage to leave can inspire dozens of others to examine their own lives. We receive letters now, forwarded through careful channels, from people who heard whispers of our story and found strength to make their own changes. Not all of them disappear as dramatically as Sophia did. Some simply find the courage to set boundaries, to seek therapy, to stop accepting that pain is the price of belonging. The morning light in Alaska has a quality unlike anywhere else I've lived. It comes in sideways, illuminating things from unexpected angles, revealing beauty in what might otherwise seem barren. It's the perfect metaphor for how trauma, approached with wisdom and support, can become a lens for seeing the world more clearly rather than a filter that obscures it. Earl Phoenix is learning to read now, tracing his fingers over the words in his mother's books. He doesn't know yet that some of those stories are about him. About the pregnancy that gave her purpose when she might have drifted. About how his existence anchored her to life when the weight of starting over threatened to overwhelm. Someday she'll tell him how he saved her as much as she saved him, but for now, he's just a little boy who loves stories about brave people and big adventures. The network we've built extends far beyond Alaska now, reaching into communities we never imagined. There's a grandmother in Arizona who hides women fleeing polygamous cults, a network of truck drivers who provide safe transportation across state lines, social workers who know how to create paper trails that lead nowhere. We're all connected by the understanding that sometimes the system fails, and when it does, we step into the gap. I've begun teaching art therapy sessions, discovering that many survivors find it easier to paint their truth than speak it. The canvases tell stories of darkness and light, trauma and triumph, the journey from victim to survivor to thriver. We display them anonymously in the community center, each one a testament to the human capacity for transformation. Sophia's latest project involves creating a manual for disappearing safely, a comprehensive guide that covers everything from financial planning to psychological preparation. It's the resource she wished had existed when she was planning her escape, compiled from hard-won experience and the collective wisdom of our network. We distribute it carefully, knowing that in the wrong hands it could be dangerous, but in the right ones, it could save lives. The ocean continues to be our greatest teacher and healer. Its rhythms remind us that everything is temporary, that storms pass, that tides turn. Sophia takes Earl Phoenix to the beach every morning, teaching him to read the water the way she learned to read the danger in our childhood home. But where her hypervigilance was born from trauma, his awareness comes from wonder. We've had to evolve our security measures as technology advances. Digital footprints are harder to erase than they once were. Facial recognition makes true disappearance more challenging. But for every new obstacle, we find solutions, staying always one step ahead of those who would use technology to trap rather than liberate. The community here has embraced us fully now. We're no longer outsiders, but integral parts of the fabric of this place. Sophia serves on the school board, advocating for trauma-informed education. I'm part of the Arts Council, bringing healing through creativity to anyone who needs it. We've put down roots in this unlikely soil, creating permanence from impermanence. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I catch Sophia staring out at the horizon with an expression I can't quite read. When I ask what she's thinking about, she usually says she's just checking the weather, but I know it's more than that. She's measuring the distance she's traveled, not in miles, but in the person she's become. The frightened girl who cut help into her skin has become a woman who provides that help to others. Our story isn't unique in its pain, but in its resolution. Too many people remain trapped in situations that slowly erode their souls, believing that loyalty means accepting abuse, that love requires self-sacrifice to the point of self-destruction. If our journey proves anything, it's that choosing yourself isn't selfish, when the alternative is spiritual death. The Refuge Network has developed its own mythology now, stories passed from survivor to survivor about the people who helped them escape. Earl has become something of a folk hero, the fisherman who saw souls drowning on dry land and threw them lifelines. Sophia is known as the navigator, the one who charts courses through impossible waters. These stories matter because they remind us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose compassion over compliance. I'm working on an exhibition now, a series of paintings that tell our story without revealing identifying details. Each canvas represents a stage of the journey: the trauma, the recognition, the planning, the escape, the healing, the transformation, and finally, the giving back. I hope it will help others recognize their own journeys in the brushstrokes, see that the path from victim to healer is walkable, even when it seems impossible. The walls of Sophia's cabin are covered with charts and maps, but also with photos of Earl Phoenix at every stage of his young life. She's documenting everything, creating the kind of detailed family record our parents never bothered with. Every first word, every milestone, every ordinary moment is preserved. It's her way of proving to herself that she's different, that she's present for her child in ways our parents never were for us. We talk sometimes about what would have happened if things had been different, if our parents had been capable of providing what we needed. Would Sophia have still felt the call of the ocean? Would she have discovered her gift for navigation? Her ability to guide others through treacherous passages? There's no way to know, but I suspect that her true nature would have emerged regardless. Some people are meant for the edges of maps, the places where the known world ends and possibility begins. As I finish writing this story, Sophia and Earl Phoenix are preparing their boat for a fishing trip. She moves with the confidence of someone who has found their place in the world, checking equipment with practiced ease while her son chatters about the fish they might catch. Watching them, I'm struck by how ordinary this scene appears, how unremarkable if you didn't know the journey that brought them here. But that's the beauty of successful healing. It looks like normal life. It looks like a mother teaching her child, neighbors helping each other, friends gathering for meals. The drama is in the getting here, but the reward is in the peaceful ordinary that follows. We've earned our boring days, our routine concerns, our small joys that would seem insignificant to those who've never lost everything. The coordinates Sophia left me were more than directions to a place. They were an invitation to reimagine what family means, what loyalty requires, what love looks like when it's not twisted by dysfunction. Following them led me not just to my sister but to myself, to the person I could become when I stopped trying to fit into the narrow space our parents had designated for us. This is my message to anyone reading this who recognizes their own pain in our story. The coordinates to your new life exist. They might be hidden in seemingly random details, encrypted in the patterns of your own longing. They might lead to Alaska or Arizona, or simply to a different way of being in the place you already are. The geography matters less than the decision to stop accepting the unacceptable, to choose healing over habit, to trust that somewhere beyond the horizon of what you've known, a better life is waiting. Sophia just called from the boat, inviting me to join them. The sun is bright, the water calm, and the fish are biting. It's an ordinary day in our extraordinary life, made possible by one woman's courage to leave everything behind and trust that the ocean would catch her. As I gather my things to join them, I send a quiet thank you to Earl, to Marcus, to everyone who helped us along the way, and most of all to Sophia, for leaving me the map that led us both home. The coordinates were real, the journey was real, the healing is real. And somewhere out there, someone else is planning their escape, gathering their courage, preparing to step into the unknown. To them I say, the water is wide, but there are boats. The journey is long, but there are harbors. The healing is hard, but there is help. And on the other side of whatever ocean you must cross, there are people who understand, who've made the same journey, who are living proof that a new life is possible. Trust the coordinates. Follow the map. Find your way home.